It should have been a day filled with laughter, balloons, and cake. Instead, under the dim evening light outside the Stellarton RCMP detachment, a small crowd stood in silence, holding candles instead of gifts, prayers instead of joy. It was Jack Sullivan's 5th birthday, but Jack wasn't there, and neither was his mother, Malehya Brooks-Murray. A grandmother read a poem, her voice trembling through the chill air. Every step is a prayer whispered to the wind, seeking answers to bring them back. Around 40 people gathered, neighbors, searchers, family, and strangers who refused to forget. They came to honor 2 children still missing after 6 long months. Every flicker of flame was a plea for truth. But among the faces, one absence was impossible to ignore. Malehya, the children's mother, was nowhere in sight. Her family later said she marked Jack's birthday privately with her own mother, far from the cameras, far from the tension. It was the first time both sides of the family had come together since May, and emotions ran deep: sorrow, suspicion, and silence. For months, the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan has torn this small Nova Scotia community apart. Their disappearance sparked endless searches, emotional vigils, and online theories that only made the wounds deeper. When Malehya left her boyfriend, Daniel Martel, at the search site the day after the children vanished, questions multiplied, and so did the judgment. Now, even on Jack's birthday, unity seemed fragile. 6 months have passed. No remains, no confirmed sightings, no explanation, only echoes of hope and grief. RCMP investigators insist they have not wavered in their commitment, but to the families standing in candlelight, promises feel hollow. They've waited too long. As one relative whispered through tears, both of them deserve better. We deserve answers. And so, on the night meant to celebrate life, Malehya's absence became its own question. Why wasn't she there? Was it pain, fear, or something more?
I'm just staying as hopeful
as the candles
possible.
dimmed
I want them
and the
home.
crowd dispersed,
I want to hold them.
one truth remained. Jack's 5th birthday passed without him, without Lilly, and without the mother who once called them her whole world. 6 months gone, still no sign, still no peace. A birthday card for Jack, but no candles, no balloons, no laughter. Instead, soft sobs carried across the Stellarton wind. What should have been a moment of joy had turned into a vigil outside the RCMP detachment. Tonight, his family gathered not to celebrate life, but to remember 2 children still missing. 6 months have passed since 6-year-old Lilly and 5-year-old Jack vanished from their rural Nova Scotia home. The search teams are gone now, but the questions remain. Every candle held tonight felt like a heartbeat refusing to stop, a fragile light pushing back against the darkness of uncertainty. Around 40 people came to stand together, bundled in coats and grief. Neighbors, volunteers, family, even strangers, all joined by a single hope. Some prayed quietly, others cried. They had searched rivers, woods, and fields, yet the only thing they had found was silence. A trembling voice began to read a poem written for the children. Every step is a prayer, whispered to the wind, a hope that a search may help our hearts to mend. The words rose and fell in the night air like a broken melody, each syllable heavy with love and loss. The crowd swayed gently as candles flickered. 2 smiling faces shone from a banner, Lilly and Jack, forever frozen in time. Every person there carried a story of the search, of the heartbreak, of days spent wondering where the trail went cold and why. A woman in the crowd whispered to a reporter, her voice trembling, "We shouldn't be here. We should be baking a cake, not holding candles." Around her, people nodded. The sound of the wind filled the silence where children's laughter should have been. Near the front stood Belinda Gray, the children's grandmother. Her face was tired but determined. "People have beautiful hearts," she said softly. "Everybody wants to help, and tonight shows that." Her words brought brief warmth to the cold evening. Yet beneath the kindness, tension lingered, the invisible wall between two families. They stood shoulder to shoulder, but the grief that bound them also divided them. Whispers of blame drifted through the crowd like smoke that no one dared name aloud. Then came the question everyone avoided speaking too loudly. Where was Malehya? The children's mother, the woman at the center of this tragedy, was nowhere in sight. Her absence pressed against the edges of the gathering like a shadow. It was the first time both sides of the family had come together since May. Among them stood Daniel Martell, the stepfather. "I missed the first vigil," he said quietly, "but not this one, not on Jack's birthday." His words were heavy, a mix of pain, guilt, and something unspoken. His presence stirred quiet unease. Some saw a grieving man. Others saw a question that refused to die. For months, the community has lived under rumors, suspicion woven into every conversation. Trust had become a rare currency. Reporters later learned that Malehya Brooks-Murray had chosen not to attend. Her family said she spent the day privately with her mother, far from cameras and speculation. They added that gifts and messages from the vigil would be delivered to her afterward. It was a simple statement, but it revealed everything and nothing. Some believed she stayed away because grief had become unbearable. Others whispered that her silence meant something more. In small towns, absence often speaks louder than presence. As the crowd quieted, an RCMP spokesperson stepped forward. "We have not wavered in our commitment to determine what happened to Lily and Jack," he said. But to those who had been waiting for 6 long months, the words felt like a script read too many times. The case remained officially a missing persons investigation, not a criminal one. To the families standing under the streetlights, that distinction mattered deeply. It meant no one was accountable. It meant they were still living inside an unanswered question. The vigil became a reflection of everything the case had turned into: heartbreak, exhaustion, and quiet frustration. No new clues, no suspects, just 2 names repeated like prayers. Lily and Jack, 2 children whose story had frozen in time. Candles burned lower as the night deepened. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft rustle of posters swaying against the RCMP walls. The children's faces seemed to watch over everyone, innocent, unknowing, forever waiting. On the steps, someone placed a small teddy bear beside a birthday drawing. In a child's handwriting it read, "Happy birthday, Jack. Come home soon." That paper, curling in the wind, said more than any news report ever could. A symbol of hope refusing to die. As people drifted away, the silence lingered. The RCMP made no new announcements. Malehya remained unseen. The media cameras dimmed, and the candles were left to burn themselves out under the quiet Nova Scotia sky. Jack's 5th birthday ended without cake, without his sister, and without his mother. 6 months missing. 2 families divided by grief. And a promise from police that still waits to be fulfilled. The vigil was over, but the silence only grew heavier. The candles had barely gone out when the noise began again. Not from Stellarton's quiet streets, but from screens, Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and true crime channels. Jack's birthday vigil, meant to unite people in grief, had become another spark in a fire that refused to die. Within hours, photos from the vigil spread online. Some users praised the community for keeping hope alive. Others zoomed in, analyzing faces, twisting moments into theories. Even grief, it seemed, could not escape the endless commentary of the internet. The loudest question online mirrored the whispers at the vigil. Where was Malehya? To strangers behind keyboards, her absence wasn't about pain, it was evidence. Every post, every rumor, added another layer to a story no one truly knew. In small towns like Lansdowne Station, privacy disappears quickly. By the 6th month, Malehya's name was no longer just part of the investigation. It was a battleground. Between sympathy and suspicion, the line had vanished. She had not spoken publicly since early June, when her last plea aired on CBC. Her voice had cracked then, begging anyone with information to come forward. Now, that voice was replaced by speculation, people interpreting her silence as guilt or exhaustion or both. For Daniel Martel, the stepfather, the spotlight was no kinder. His interviews had drawn their own wave of judgment, every pause, every glance replayed in slow motion by strangers seeking meaning where none existed. The internet had turned mourning into analysis. The RCMP, meanwhile, said little. Their official statement after the vigil was brief. We continue to investigate all possibilities. But for families desperate for answers, those 5 words felt empty, like a door half open to nowhere. Behind the scenes, major crime investigators still worked the file daily. Search warrants, phone records, forensic tests, the machinery of modern policing grinding slowly forward. Yet to the public, it seemed nothing was moving at all. By mid-October, hope and frustration had become indistinguishable. Posters faded in shop windows. The reward, $150,000 for information, remained unclaimed. The story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan was beginning to slip from headlines into memory. But the internet never forgets. True crime creators began uploading daily recaps, dissecting timelines, and comparing satellite images. Some were sincere investigators. Others chased views. Each upload reignited pain for a family already breaking apart. Belinda Gray refused to watch most of them. They talk like they know my grandchildren, she told a local paper. All they know are rumors. Her voice carried both anger and exhaustion, the price of living in a story you didn't choose. In Stellarton cafes, the case was still the quiet conversation over morning coffee. People debated theories like weather, softly, constantly, with no resolution. Everyone wanted to help, yet every word risked deepening the divide. For the RCMP, the challenge was control. Every new rumor forced detectives to double-check, to trace claims back to nowhere. As one investigator later said, we spend more time disproving Facebook than following real leads. Still, some updates came quietly. Detectives revisited the area around Lansdowne Station, retracing paths already searched. Cadaver dogs had found nothing in October, but the ground held secrets no one was ready to stop searching for. Malehya remained unseen. According to relatives, she had moved out of the province for a while, trying to escape the pressure. Her silence became both her protection and her curse, the absence that the world refused to understand. To many mothers watching online, her pain felt familiar, the paralyzing guilt of being blamed for what you couldn't control. But to others, her distance was suspicious. In the digital age, empathy and accusation travel at the same speed. As the story grew colder, the community turned inward again. The same woods, once filled with searchers, now stood untouched, their trails covered in autumn leaves. The posters still fluttered in the wind, reminders of a mystery unsolved and a promise unfulfilled. For the families, time had stopped on May 2nd. Every vigil, every prayer circle was just another mark on a calendar that refused to move forward. RCMP continued to call it an active case. But to everyone else, it was a wound that never closed. 6 months had passed since 2 children disappeared into the Nova Scotia woods. No suspects, no arrests, no trace. Only a mother's silence, a stepfather's shadow, and a community haunted by questions that never fade. The vigil ended, but the noise that followed still echoes. Whispers, theories, and anger fill the gaps left by truth. As the autumn winds rise over Stellarton, one truth remains. The disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan is no longer just a case. It's a fracture that runs through every heart that still remembers. After months of speculation, RCMP investigators returned quietly to the property where the children were last seen. It was early October, the leaves turning gold. 2 teams of cadaver dogs swept through 40 square kilometers of dense forest, searching for what no one wanted to find. For days, the dogs worked through swamps, ravines, and shallow riverbeds. Handlers marked grids, followed scents, and waited for signs. Locals stopped by the edge of the road, watching silently. Everyone knew what the search meant, and what it might confirm. When the search ended, the report was brief but heavy. No human remains found, no bones, no trace. 40 kilometers and nothing. It was both relief and devastation, a mystery that refused even the comfort of an answer. RCMP confirmed that 2 specialized dog teams had completed their work. The results were conclusive. There was no evidence of human decomposition anywhere near the search site. But that statement only deepened the confusion. If they weren't there, where were they? Daniel Martel spoke to the media soon after. "I knew they wouldn't find anything," he said calmly. He had been asking for the dogs for months, and now that they'd come, his words carried an eerie certainty. "I'm just glad they finally did it." Reporters pressed him. Why was he so sure? Daniel only shrugged. "Because I know they're not here." To some, it sounded like faith. To others, like knowledge no one else could have. The interview spread quickly, reigniting debate online. For investigators, the search results created a paradox. No remains meant hope, but no clues meant nothing to build on. Months of work had brought them full circle, back to the same question that began it all. How could 2 children vanish without a trace? RCMP spokesperson Staff SGT Rob McCammon addressed the press a few days later. He maintained a careful tone. "It remains an active missing persons investigation," he said. "We are following every lead." But the phrase, "not criminal," echoed like a verdict of its own. For families waiting by the phone, "not criminal" sounded like "not urgent." After 6 months of silence, those words felt cold. The case was still open, but hope was fading. Behind closed doors, relatives wondered if the file had already gone cold. Community volunteers, once 100 strong, had dwindled to a few dozen. Search maps were folded away. Some still walked the trails on weekends, out of loyalty, not optimism. They said the forest had gone quiet, as if even nature had grown tired of waiting. At night, the posters glowed faintly under streetlights, Lily's and Jack's faces printed beside the word missing. The ink had begun to fade from rain and time. Someone taped a note beside them. Still searching. Still waiting. Inside the RCMP detachment, the case files had multiplied. Witness statements, phone logs, interview transcripts. Officers cross-checked timelines, retraced every 911 call, reviewed footage from local stores and gas stations. Yet nothing connected. Every lid dissolved into another dead end. Forensic teams had examined vehicles, electronics, even soil samples. Everything came back clean. No signs of struggle, no trace of blood, no confirmed sighting beyond May 2nd. It was as if the children had simply disappeared from the world itself. That impossibility haunted everyone. Investigators, family, the public. The human mind refuses to accept nothing. We invent patterns to fill silence, theories to fill fear. And in the absence of evidence, imagination becomes its own investigator. By late October, frustration began to turn inward. Some blamed the police for missing early leads. Others whispered about family secrets, about things unsaid during those first crucial hours. The case had stopped moving, but suspicion never did. RCMP faced pressure from all sides, from journalists demanding transparency, from relatives demanding action, and from an online audience demanding a villain. Their official updates grew shorter, colder, more careful. Every word was weighed like evidence. Behind the scenes, one detective described it simply. We're stuck between two truths, that something happened, and that we can't prove what. Those words never made headlines, but they captured the essence of the investigation. Endless motion without progress. For the community, the cadaver dog search had been a final hope, a way to turn whispers into facts. Instead, it left only silence. No remains, no resolution. Just the same hollow phrase. Still missing. In Stellarton, the night air grew colder. The candles from Jack's vigil were gone now, their wax hardened on the pavement. Only the posters remained, weathered, torn, and still pleading with anyone who passed. Have you seen Lily and Jack? 6 months, 40 kilometers searched, and not a single trace. For some, that meant the children might still be alive. For others, it meant something darker, that the truth was buried far deeper than anyone had dared to look. And the silence, once again, was complete. When the RCMP confirmed that cadaver dogs had found nothing, the Sullivan case entered a new phase, not of discovery, but of exhaustion. For months, every lead had been followed. Now, there were no maps left to trace, no ground left to search, only questions that cut deeper each day. The families waited for news that never came. Some checked their phones every hour. Others stopped answering calls altogether. The silence wasn't just from the RCMP. It was inside every home that once held laughter. Belinda Gray tried to stay strong, but her voice began to tremble in interviews. I thought we'd find them by now, she said softly. Her eyes looked past the camera, as if she was searching for two small faces only she could see. In Stellarton, people spoke of her with quiet respect. She was the grandmother who never stopped hoping, even when others had moved on. But behind that strength was the same ache that haunted everyone. How could two children simply vanish into air? On the other side of the family,
4.5 months
the Brooks
after Lily
household
and Jack
kept
Sullivan
its
went
distance.
missing from their home in
Malehya
Pictou County,
remained
the RCMP
unseen,
says it will send in
choosing
cadaver
silence
dogs trying
over
to pick up the
confrontation.
scent of
Her
human
mother
remains.
shielded her from
This
reporters,
is something that family
saying
members,
only,
including Lily and Jack's
"She's trying to
stepfather, have been
heal."
asking for.
But healing was
So why
hard in
now?
a town
At a
that
news briefing
refused
on
to
Friday,
forget.
an RCMP
Months
spokesperson
of
said that
rumors
although
had turned
they don't
grief
have any
into
information
suspicion.
to suggest the children
Every
are
word,
deceased,
every photo,
they have to
every
consider all
absence
avenues.
became fuel for
Police
debate.
say they've been looking
In
into a
private,
variety of leads over the
both
course of
sides
the
of the family
investigation,
blamed
and that they
themselves
now plan
and
to
each
use the
other.
dogs in an area
Even
where they
love had
believe
started
there's the
to
highest
sound like
probability
accusation.
of finding Lily
Daniel
and Jack.
Martel,
Two
the
dogs and
stepfather,
2 RCMP
stopped
officers
giving
trained in
interviews.
locating human remains
Neighbors
are
said he
coming from
rarely left
BC
his
to conduct
property
the
anymore.
search.
Once a
The
central
children's
figure in
paternal
the search,
grandmother, Belinda
he now
Gray, says
lived
she's
like a
happy to see
ghost
the
among
dogs being
whispers.
deployed, but
The
she still
community no
questions what
longer
took
knew
so long.
what to believe.
8.5
The
square
RCMP
kilometers of dense
continued to
woods near
insist
their
that
home
no one was
have already
cleared,
been searched,
and no one
but
was
until
charged.
now, only
To
dogs that can
outsiders,
trace human
it
scent
sounded
but
like
not
balance.
human remains.
To the families, it sounded like limbo. No guilt, no innocence, just a heavy, endless maybe. The investigation's weight began to crush everyone it touched. Some relatives moved away. Others avoided one another entirely. The shared goal, finding Lily and Jack, was still there, but buried beneath hurt and mistrust. Even the public vigils became tense. Once united by candles and prayers, the gatherings grew smaller. People came, but they stood apart. It was no longer a single family waiting. It was two sides of a broken heart, standing back to back. In small towns, grief is never private. The same stores, the same streets, every corner held a memory. And when the missing are children, the community itself becomes haunted. No one could drive past that detachment without feeling the weight of what wasn't found. As fall deepened into winter, the leaves that once covered the trails were replaced by frost. The search areas lay untouched now, white, silent, frozen. The woods that once echoed with searchers' voices had grown eerily still. Belinda refused to call it over. In her living room, the children's photos still hung side by side. Each night, she lit a small candle beneath them. "I'm not giving up," she told reporters. But it feels like we're the only ones left trying. For the Brooks family, privacy was a shield. They stopped attending public events, refusing interviews or statements. To them, silence was safety. But to others, that silence became something darker, a mystery feeding itself. Malehya's last public appearance had been months ago, in the summer. Her plea had been raw. Please, bring my babies home. Now, that same clip replayed endlessly online, used, dissected, judged. Her grief had become content for strangers. In private, friends said she cried often, unable to watch the news. She felt trapped between love and suspicion, between wanting to speak and fearing every word would be twisted. To the world, she was invisible. To herself, she was breaking. The community wanted closure, but closure requires truth. And truth was the one thing no one could find. RCMP's updates had grown sparse. Each one ended the same way. We continue to follow all leads. Words that meant movement, but no progress. For those still searching, time had become the enemy. With each passing day, memories faded and questions multiplied. Lily's 7th birthday approached quietly. No celebration, only the sound of wind through empty trees. Reporters stopped visiting daily. National coverage moved on. What had once been a headline became a footnote, an unresolved story tucked behind newer tragedies. But in Stellarton, the wound never healed. It only learned to hide. A family once united by 2 children now stood worlds apart. One side waiting in silence, the other speaks into it. Between them, only the echoes of names whispered in prayer. Lily, Jack, still missing, still loved, still gone. The candles have burned out. The posters are fading. And yet, the questions remain, floating in the cold Nova Scotia air like ghosts that refuse to rest. 6 months of searching, 6 months of silence. The case of Lily and Jack Sullivan has left behind only whispers, prayers, and a void where truth should be. Some nights, Belinda Gray still lights a candle in her window, one small flame for each child. It's a ritual now, a quiet
But everybody's appreciated right now, and I know the general feeling in Pictou County is great sense of appreciation for all those who are trying so hard to find these little ones. And so I don't know the particular role that each of them is playing. I will say, because people have asked me, that our role as council, my role as warden and our councilors, we depend on our specialists or our experts. And the family's under a great deal of stress, and they're, certainly being asked for a lot of interviews and a lot of questions, and that's human nature to be questioning. And but I think it's a tremendous stress on the families, and I think it's important for all of us to not get carried away on social media or whatever, surmising that this or that or whatever's in somebody's head. But to leave the families be, and they're having a tough time, I'm sure. Just put yourself in the case of your children missing or your grandchildren missing, and the terrific amount of stress that's there. And so I think the family should be left alone with their people there to comfort them. And again, the best we can do is try and support the searchers.
Promised to never stop looking. But she knows the search isn't just in the woods anymore. It's in people's hearts, in the corners of a community still waiting to understand what really happened. Every parent watching this story imagines the same impossible question. What if it were my children? What would I do if the world stopped answering? The RCMP says the file remains open. No suspects, no closure. Only time moving forward while hope stands still. And for 2 names, Lily and Jack, that hope is all that's left. If you know something, even the smallest detail, come forward. Somewhere, someone remembers what happened on that quiet morning in May. Somewhere, an answer still waits. Because these stories don't end when the news cameras leave. They end when the truth is finally found. And until then, we keep their names alive. This is True Child Cases. Real stories, real children. If you believe every missing child deserves to be remembered, subscribe, share their story, and help keep the search alive. Until next time, keep asking the question that matters most. Where are they?